This is Siofra again, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. We're going to do Venus today, trying to continue to flesh out our segments on working with planetary forces. And Ian is with me again, so he can fill in some of the other types of information from Barden's work and so forth. So as we did with Mercury, I want to start off with just the basic scientific information about the planet itself. And one of the things that's interesting is that a day on Venus is actually longer than a year. And it sounds strange, but a day on Venus is 243 Earth days, and a year is 224 Earth days. So its rotation is definitely odd when it comes to that. And it spins clockwise instead of counterclockwise like all the other planets. So instead of the sun rising in the east, it rises in the west, which is just kind of entertaining in itself. It is the second brightest natural object in the sky after the moon. So only the moon is brighter than Venus when it comes to seeing it there. And you can see it either after the sun has gone down in the west or before the sun rises in the east. And when you see it before the sun rises in the east, it's called the morning star. When you see it after it sets in the west, it's called the evening star. And it's just how it became obvious to anyone who lives on the planet in ages gone by that it was there because of its brightness. It's also hotter than Mercury, and so it's not a cool environment. Unlike all of our fantasies about it from ancient times and so forth, its actual temperature is about 900 degrees Fahrenheit or 482 degrees centigrade. So,
bring your sunblock.
Yeah, I don't think sunblock would help. There's sulfuric acid in the atmosphere as well. There's a theory that there is some potential life form living in the atmosphere because there are some areas that don't seem to change and don't mix with the atmosphere. The upper atmosphere actually moves faster than the rest of the planet, and it only takes I think about 4 days for the upper air to go around the planet versus the planet rotation itself taking 280 or 43 days. So yeah, it's the odd man out or woman out in this case. But of course, because of its placement in the ancient world and so forth, and its associations with Venus, goddess of love, Aphrodite, and other love goddesses, it is known for that kind of energy. So even though it is physically very hot and not amenable to life as we know it, it is considered watery in its magical aspects. So it represents beauty and love, all kinds of love, familial, romantic, self, friendship, and so forth. Any kind of heart connection that you have with someone it rules that kind of thing. And grace and attraction. And so if you're working with it, you want to work on those aspects that it has. And of course, like anything else, the negative would be the opposite. So obsession, love obsession, objectification, so forth would also be under Venus, and problems in friendships and that kind of thing. Art, creativity, and just beauty of all kinds. Green is her color, which is one of the reasons I'm wearing green today. And emerald is the stone. 7 is the number. And Friday is the day. Copper is the metal. So that's just the basic stuff before we get into the Aphrodite goddess information. So I'll let you fill in the numerical.
Sure. A couple of things. We'll start with the number correlation of Venus, which is 7, of course. And that goes to speak to the tree of life. The 7th sphere is called Netzach, and that's the one that's pertains to Venus, and here's some aspects of the number 7 that pertain to the number Venus, or the number of Venus, yes. I guess it is the number of Venus anyway. 7 is the number of harmony, fertility, propagation, and growing. It is also the number of love with all its phases, no matter whether the lowest form of love or the highest cosmic aspect of love is in question. Mercy, benevolence, virtuousness, and happiness are also aspects of love and therefore appertain to the number of 7. Apart from this, 7 is the number of beauty, purity, and harmony. With regard to astrology, 7 is the number of Venus, so that all methods and practices of the Venus magic, scale magic, also belong to this numerical category. Amongst other things, the 7 basic notes are also analogous to the number 7, so are the 7 tatwas, 7 states of maturity, chakras, etc. The graphic representation of number 7 is an equilateral heptagon, basically a 7-pointed star.
Or the fairy star.
Or a septangle, if you want to use that word. There are, however, other symbols for number 7, including a great triangle with a square in its middle, or vice versa, a square with a triangle in its middle, depending on the number to be entered graphically. The square is sometimes replaced by a cross with arms of equal length, which is drawn in the middle of the triangle. By doing this, one gets 7 points, alluding to the number 7. Many other things are analogous to this number, for instance, the 7 spectral colors, the colors of the rainbow, etc. Okay, and then we also find out here, Barden talks a little bit about the intelligences of the Venus sphere. Having done the 3 above mentioned spheres first, which, as said before, are very important, blah, 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 they confidently try to get in touch with the intelligences of the Venus sphere. It should be mentioned at the beginning that all intelligences of the sphere of a fascinating beauty and power of attraction, which unfortunately has sealed the fate of many a sphere magician, or at the least hindered him from further development. If the magician allows himself to be enthralled by the extraordinary beauty of the intelligences of the Venus sphere, he is giving up his chances for further magic development, for he will, in consequence, again and again be attracted by the Venus sphere until finally his further intercourse with this sphere will be equivalent to a pact. Not only the positive but also the negative intelligence of the Venus sphere are of diabolic beauty and seductive character. Thus great steadfastness is needed to resist their temptations. Venus sphere has an oscillation intoxicated with love, which puts any sphere magician into a state of happiness that may be compared with an ecstasy of love, so that he is often tempted either to remain in that sphere with his mental body, which no doubt would cause his physical death, or to visit that sphere again and again. If the magician is overcome by such temptations, he by and by becomes completely enthralled by this sphere and will find it hard to get out of it again. His development to perfection then becomes quite impossible for a long time, if not for his lifetime. The magician, however, has worked systematically at his development, has worked himself through the above-mentioned spheres, in the order suggested, blah, 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 can confidently travel to higher spheres, including the Venus sphere. Therefore, every magician should test himself first to see if he has the necessary maturity, power, and steadfastness. So I thought that was a pretty interesting view in it. And one last thing, Barden's recommendations for incense for the Venus sphere. He recommends pulverized incense, or pulverized cinnamon as the only incense, or his more complex which he calls his intensified mixture, is cinnamon, rose blossoms, coriander seed, quindel blossoms, lily blossoms, all in equal quantities and in a pulverized state.
Okay. So, I have had a lot of encounters with the Venusian sphere in various ways, and with the goddess Aphrodite in particular. But before I get into that, when Ian was talking about the potential hazards for spending so much time in the Venusian sphere. When I was, oh, let's say, it was Gary, my friend, who had a hard time staying in his body. He was constantly running around outside of his body haphazardly and without control, which is not a good state to have. And he was in my house one day, and he was telling me about finding the Venusian sphere and the beings there and how beautiful they were and how much he liked being there. And he went there like every night, all the time. It was sort of an attraction that he had for that space, which is the descriptor that Ian just read, basically. And when he told me about that, I was worried because it seemed like a bad idea. Anything that you overindulge in can become a problem, regardless. Balance is the goal for sure when it comes to all things. And I expressed my concern for his well-being, that if he spent too much time there, he would end up being stuck there. And this was before I ever heard of Barden or read any of his books. I already was like doing a lot or knew a lot of this stuff before Ian and I actually met, which is just kind of interesting in and of
the
itself.
stuff isn't unique to Barden, but it's the best explanation anybody can get all in one place.
Well, needless to say, I hadn't read anything about it. I just knew it. It was
Well,
just one of those things I think I came in with. And then the next time I saw Gary, he was angry at me because he said when he went to go to the Venusian sphere, there was a block, like a mental block, psychic block, an energetic block, and he couldn't get there anymore. And he figured that somehow I had done it. Now, if I did, I don't remember doing it. It was an unconscious act on my part, but when he was telling me about it, I thought it was a good thing because it would probably save him later down the
a
road.
person's guardian spirits will try to prevent them from doing that, but they seem to get really behind the free will thing and not want to give too much information or work too hard to stop you.
Yeah, well, in any event, I thought it was good that something was blocking him, and if I was responsible, I was fine with that. Because,
Sounds like that was the best thing for him.
yeah, yeah, because I instinctively knew it was a bad idea. So it's always interesting when the things that you know and remember and so forth get validated later.
Well, of course, that's the way it works. You know, that's how you know what's real and what's not. You find
True.
out what accords to reality and what things are just might as well be in somebody's head. You know.
So my first goddess I realized was the Virgin Mary. She was my very first goddess. I'm not sure how that happened since I wasn't raised Catholic, but I related to her on a very deep emotional level and prayed to her all the time when I was really young. And it turns out that my higher guardian, higher self, Moida, is got that kind of energy, has the Virgin Mary kind of energy, and that was actually my first introduction to the concept of roles, taking on a role and having a title. Because during one of our channeling sessions, she explained that sometimes when people called upon the Virgin Mary, her or other beings like her would answer the call because they had that specific energy frequency, and which I thought was just sort of interesting at the time. But my first conscious goddess that I had was Aphrodite, and that was the fourth grade. So I think I was about 10 when I was in the fourth grade, and and that's when I learned about Greek and Roman mythology, and my mind was blown and everything. And so I immediately adopted Aphrodite as my personal goddess, named my doll Aphrodite. And my sister got jealous because my doll was a goddess and she wanted to be one too. So we named her doll Venus. I figured Venus was the knockoff. That was kind of my view at 10, that Aphrodite was like the original kind of thing. And when I was reading up a little bit on Aphrodite before doing this, I was reminded that Aphrodite didn't actually have parents. that's the reason why she is shown, her and Venus both are shown coming out of the sea in the foam. Apparently Kronos, when he was killed, was his testes were cut off and thrown into the ocean, and then she was born from that union of water and time, I guess. Kronos would represent time. And so she came out of that. So her origins predated a lot of the other myths that are out there. So it's always interesting. So I brought along some of my goddesses. So this is one of my, let's see if I can get her so she's not so bright. Yeah, she likes to be bright. Yeah, there we go. There's a little bit of a view of her. Um, and she is like the water bearer, which is appropriate for Venus. And I got this when I was in the Kispioks, and so I've had this since the 80s, early 80s, late 70s. I saw her in a store. She fell and broke, and I put her back together, and like at her knees is where she cracked. Yeah, but I still have her, and it doesn't seem to have like harmed her energy. And so that one is out here in our temple, and then this one is the one I found. This one locally in town. Let's see if we can, yeah, get an angle on her. Okay, that works a little bit. Statues are bright. It's amazing. But I picked her up locally, and she is in on my bedroom altar. So I keep her there with my other goddesses, and and I certainly have had a connection with Aphrodite for a long time. I remember a past life where I was a priestess in her temple, and the temple was on the coast of Greece, like on a cliff, and there was like stairs going down the side of the cliff down to the water. And my daughter in this life was my daughter in that life as well, and was also a priestess in the temple. And she fell in love with some guy that came into the temple, and we weren't supposed to like go off with them, and she threw herself off a cliff and died in the ocean, which was interesting because in this life she was terrified of water when she could see it. It was like if we were driving along and she saw water out the window, she would just start screaming at the top of her lungs. And I was terrified of her being on heights, like getting close to a height. My son and her could be standing right next to each other. I wouldn't be worried about him at all, and I'd be freaking out about her standing too close to an edge. And so that was kind of interesting that I had that memory that came up after they were born. And this is my Venusian wand, which I've shown to you guys before. It's myrtle wood. And the interesting thing about it was I didn't realize I was making a Venusian wand until I was finished making it. It's the only wand I have that has two ends. And so depending on which part I hold, this is some green silk I put on there so I can grab a hold of it and aim, whatever stone I'm using at whatever I'm doing. And it has two garnets, which are my birthstone, the red garnet and the green garnet over here. And then I have two emeralds and two rose quartz, and then a cryoprase, which is a very high copper content, and green, because green is the color. And then when I counted them, I realized I had 7 stones. And of course, I did green copper on one side and the red copper on the other, just to give it some kind of a balance, I guess. And certainly the rose quartz is one of the stones that people use when they're working with Venus. And apparently Venus is one of the energies you use in money spells a lot.
And I don't know if people know it in general, but copper, when it patina's green. And
exactly.
I believe they called that viridian when they got that from the copper that patinaed. So yeah, that's how copper relates to green.
Yes. Yeah, I was reading that too. Yeah. And so it's just sort of interesting. So what I've discovered with this wand, Venus is good for healing, and the green garnet is for physical ailments when I'm working on somebody with physical difficulties, and the red garnet is for emotional issues, heart problems, heart energy problems, uh, communication and that kind of thing, which it seems to suit quite well. So, and then the other thing about Venus and us, Venus came to me with signs, vivid signs. One of her main flowers is the rose. And when I needed to have a job and I was going from becoming a standard kind of secretary to a massage therapist, I was sent these roses each time I went to go have an interview. So I ended up with 2 roses given to me by total strangers. And that was a very clear indication that that job was for me and that I was on the right path. And they just came to me. And that's actually one of the aspects of Venus as a planet. Its attraction is like you don't have to go and do something in order to make something happen. You just are and be and attract things to you. So it's like a
Venus
passive
is magnetic,
attraction.
just like a magnet. Think of it that way, magnetic fluid, and that's its.
Yeah.
That's its
And actually,
aspect.
magnetite and stuff like that are some of the stones you can use with it as well. So that was something. And then when Ian and I got together, we were trying to figure out when we were going to, what our marriage date was going to be, and we ended up picking May 23rd. And May 23rd is actually the day of the rose, and is sacred to Aphrodite and Ishtar and other love goddesses. And so the rose, once again, and her energy was definitely there with our union when we got together. And so, yeah. And when I was doing the little research, I was reading a little bit of Penzac stuff, and he was talking about, let's see. Oh, the one thing he said, which I hadn't checked yet, was the first hour after sunrise is the first hour of Venus. But that we have personal Venus periods, and your personal Venus period starts 260 days after your birthday and lasts for 52 days. And so I decided, okay, I would figure it out. So I figured out everybody's personal Venus period. And like I left that piece of paper over here. Okay. The other piece of paper has the personal Venus
Do we know
periods.
where this information derived from?
That's one of the things I'm going to say. No, we don't, because that's pretty typical of Penzac. I haven't had a chance to find out what the source material that he's getting this from, but I just ran down a rabbit hole. Did I put this all together on a separate page, or did I just keep on going? Okay. So I figured out Ian's personal Venus cycle is May 15th to July 6th. So when we were getting married, you were in your personal Venus cycle, which I thought was kind of cool. And my daughter and my son both have theirs near the same time because they were just born like a week apart, within the same week as you. And mine is October 4th to November 25th, so I'm in mine right now. Until Thanksgiving, I guess.
So what are the implications of being in your personal Venus period?
I don't know, maybe it's a good time to do Venus
love stuff,
and whatnot. And everyone has, the planetary cycle is from December 6th to January 26th, so my birthday is right in the middle, right towards the end of the planetary cycle. So I don't know what it means because, as I was saying, Penzac writes a lot of this stuff down, but then he doesn't say where the information came from, what the source was for it, which is one of the things we find annoying about his work, because we like to know where did it come from.
Sometimes he renames them with names of his own invention.
Exactly, like the...
whatever it was, I don't remember.
I think it was the LBR, actually, the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram. Did he rename that, or he just claimed it as a witch thing? He might have just claimed that as a witchcraft item, but it's been too long since we've read that part. But that's the thing, is like Barden's evocation book, of course, has the names and job descriptions and so forth of all of the positive spirit beings of the Venusian sphere. And so, and their seals.
Yeah, and
so you can,
his isn't just a collection of information somebody put together. He has personally contacted every single one of them and
a lot of
got their
work.
permission to use their seal and stuff in the book.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that information is like, they give you the seals, but then after you do the evocation, the seal or the name can change because the being might decide it wants to give you something more direct. It's like a direct link
Yeah,
for
there's
yourself.
one in particular, or a couple of them that are very complicated seals for the first evocation, but then they give you a shortcut that's easy to draw and to bring up. And
Yeah.
some of them won't.
Yeah. So, Friday being the day for doing the Venusian work, green being the color, emerald the stone, copper the metal, all those things, if you're going to be working with that energy, trying to be specific to it, the more of that you can do, the stronger the link and the connection you can make to that particular energy itself. And that's how spells work. It's like, you're focusing your intention, your mind, your energy, all that stuff. And the more symbols that make sense to you and that fit with your own personal worldview and your feeling about the universe and how it works, the stronger the link will
Yeah,
be.
if you're working on it and visualization and stuff, if you want to put Venus energy into something, just picture it as nice and green and put that color right in there.
And of course, green is good healing energy for the same reason. And I wore my emeralds and rubies because, why not? And I put a little green cloth down there for the Venus statues just to give them their own little surface and so forth. But it's like, that's sort of the whole point of the planetary work is to make that link and connection to that specific energy. And it's hard to explain. It's not like there are beings with physical bodies on Venus, but there are very specific types of forms that are there, and and they can take on whatever aspect is the most attractive to the person that they're dealing with.
As long as it remains, if they're if they're beings of that sphere, they have to remain. They can't try to fool you by appearing to be beings of a different sphere, that type of thing. They have to stay within the realm. If they're Venus spirits, that's what they're always going to be. They're going to be greenish, or have a greenish aspect and love and harmony and all that, and they'll fit. If it doesn't fit,
So if you're trying to really get in touch with that kind of stuff, wearing green,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
And actually put the light. If you make a talisman or something, put the light energy into it. Green light, not just the color green. Like what I said earlier, I meant actually put the green light right in there and compress it down to a strong force that can work for what you want to do.
yeah. And I noticed in a lot of source material out there, they have different numbers for the planets, and it just when it first started coming out, number 4 is a number they associate with Venus, and I'm like, what? Makes no sense to me. Again,
Who knows where they came up with those?
yeah, people come up with stuff, so I try to go to a source that I am confident of, and it matches the tree of life and everything
Yeah,
as well.
and he's only, yeah,
Yeah.
he's the only one who I have pretty much complete confidence in. Um, aside from a couple questionable issues, which I think are issues of translations, I have some older translations of his books. I think there are some translation difficulties, make things sound a little bit different, but we're talking just a word or something here and there.
But that's the thing, if you're going to work with a planetary energy, you have to really involve yourself in, um, like when I made the wand, like I did with my Mercury wand, I worked on it on Fridays, I tried to make sure that I was in the right frame of mind whenever I worked on it. had the right energy thinking going on when I was putting the things on. Um, and I even put a secret symbol of the planet underneath one of the stones. It's like covered up, but it's there underneath the center stone. And yeah, but it's just so fascinating to me that I'm creating this wand and I'm just like doing my thing, and then all of a sudden it goes like, bam! Oh yeah, that's a Venusian wand. And
Some little danglies on it.
that's a little thread
Yeah.
from the silk thread. It doesn't always stay completely straight. But yeah, I mean, and I just thought the garnets were great because it's my birthstone, and it just seemed right somehow. And now that, according to the book, my, yeah, everybody's Venus thing is in January area or something like that, seems like a good stone. It works for me anyway. And that's the important thing. And myrtle wood is well known to be a love energy kind of wood and so forth. I wouldn't have put this on, like a piece of pine, for example. It wouldn't make any sense energetically to me. But, all right, so that's just a little bit about working with the Venus sphere and Venus energy and so forth, and some of the general things applied to it. So, I guess we'll call this a good time to stop. And as usual, if you want to get a hold of me, you can send me an email at shiefrasmagicalcove@gmail.com. You can friend me on Facebook, Siofra Bradigan. You can put comments in on the video, ask specific questions, and we try to answer things as well as we can. So, hope this all finds everybody in a loving place when they watch this. And blessed be.
Blessed be.